So thank you so much, everyone, for coming, and thank you also to Sevim and Ulrike and Aya and Florian for speaking, and also some liber-net team who are here who've done an enormous amount of work to bring us to Berlin and launch this initiative here with you. So, as Florian mentioned, I'm the director of liber-net. It doesn't translate. It doesn't mean love network. It means liber as in liberty. So we don't translate quite so well in German, but love network is also not so bad. So we've been around for about 3 years, primarily working on issues of free speech and censorship, but we also touch on issues of privacy, surveillance, and other digital controls. And our work has mostly been focused on the US, really, though as Florian mentioned, I'm Australian, although I do have a German passport, but another shameful person who doesn't speak German with a German passport. But anyway, that's another very long story. But prior to that, I ran a progressive digital rights NGO in Southeast Asia, where we worked on digital free speech issues, digital authoritarianism in countries like Myanmar, Thailand, the Philippines, Indonesia, etc. And we were funded by a lot of the kind of big liberal foundations to do that work. We developed a fairly large team, and we had a pretty long leash. We had quite a lot of freedom in terms of what we were allowed to do. But then after Brexit and after Trump, something kind of very much changed in that space. Not that it was perfect before or there weren't problems, but suddenly we were getting much more direction, things that we couldn't do. So 3 years ago, I embarked on doing something new, in large part catalyzed by COVID, and particularly the speech suppression that happened during COVID, which none of my supposedly free speech, free expression NGO friends seemed to care about, even though that was exactly what many of these NGOs had been set up to champion. Instead, a lot of them decided that the bigger issue was to combat disinformation. And it also turns out that a lot of my experience working in digital, on digital authoritarianism in Asia was now very applicable to the West. And this is another reason that I saw, something is very strange. What's going on? Suddenly speech is very, very restrictive. Content is coming down, and the people who said they used to care suddenly don't care about these issues. So with that shift, I ended up, again, I think as Florian mentioned, working with Matt Taibbi on the Twitter files. He was one of the first people given access to the documents when Elon Musk purchased the company. Now, I'm not a huge Elon fan. I don't believe his primary motivation is free speech. That said, as everyone here agrees by the sounds of it, that said, what was in the files was very, very important and a very important story. And I think it confirmed a lot of what people believed or had suspected, which was that there was quite a large-scale coordinated effort to censor dissident views on social media, not just in the US, but globally. So again, this was primarily justified under the banner of countering disinformation, countering hate speech. But essentially, this was a kind of weaponization of these terms, which one group used in order to shut up their competing political adversaries. And one of the things I find quite so difficult to communicate to a lot of my progressive friends is that countering disinformation is just as much a weapon of information warfare as disinformation is itself. So they seem to not be able to understand that in the way that Trump does, shouting fake news is also a way of intervening artificially into the discussion. So again, and what was peculiar about this system was that the people who seemed to, for many decades, had been the champions of free speech, now either shrugged their shoulders and said nothing, or actually became part of a system of speech suppression, making a Faustian bargain with the state, who they previously kept watch on, and now worked with to implement a new speech suppression regime. If you ask why, I think the primary justification was to combat a growing populist threat that emerged out of the 2008, or as a result of the 2008 financial crisis, culminating with Brexit and Trump in the Anglosphere, and of course with your own dynamics here in Germany. And this specter of populism, I think, is one of the main reasons that the progressives abandoned their previous commitment to free speech and made a compromise with the state in a kind of united front, if you will, to protect democracy, I think, is the justification that's particularly often used here. So protecting democracy by undermining democracy and free speech. Apparently that's the new way forward. At the same time, often the right claims that this is a kind of left-wing conspiracy to censor them. I would actually say it's an extremist centrist project that works with progressives to censor both left and right populism. So, and if you look at where these systems have emerged, in the UK it emerged under the Tories, under the Conservatives, in Australia, where I'm from, under a centre-right government, in Europe under von der Leyen, not a progressive, as I understand, and also in Germany under Merkel. So back to the Twitter files. So I became involved essentially because Matt Taibbi was looking through all these files. He saw all these NGOs, he saw all these liberal foundations, he saw these academic institutions, and he said, what's going on? I don't know this world, but I knew that world. That was my world. And so I kind of reached out, and he basically brought me on board to help out. The result of that, and actually, Sophie, if you can put, was this map, which was our first attempt at mapping what became known as, or what was coined by Markus Schellenberger as, the Censorship-Industrial Complex. But this is essentially a US map and really misses a huge amount of other things going on. This was our first pass that we did within maybe 2 or 3 months of work, of documenting the most important, again, in the end, predominantly US and UK, a couple of European organizations in there. But Germany hadn't been mapped in this way, as we understood from talking to many free speech advocates and journalists here. So, which brings us to Germany. So now this is just a teaser. I'm going to show you this map more at the end, just so you kind of have an idea. But this is our attempt to kind of use the same formula that we used in mapping the censorship complex in the US and the UK to the German context. We very much welcome kind of your input. I would also just quickly note that we work with at least 6, 7, 8 different German advisors and researchers and specialists on this report. So whilst I'm the kind of Australian looking in from the outside and kind of bringing my knowledge of having done other types of mapping and working on these issues globally, we also were very careful to work with a large number of German advisors to try and get it as right as possible. I'm sure we've made some mistakes, so if you have improvement suggestions, then we are very much looking forward to hearing from you. And why Germany? So I think when we look at this system, the 3 most important institutions now are the EU, the UK government, and the German government. I would argue that these are the most influential states or entities, governing entities, that have continued this system. In the US, this system has kind of been put down to a degree because the Trump administration did in some ways target a lot of people on the populist right. That said, the Trump administration has its own free speech problems. I'm certainly not here to defend that either, but the Trump free speech aggressions look very different to this type of system. It's kind of very in your face, whereas this system is much more kind of behind the scenes. So what did we do in order to make this happen? So I'll take you through very quickly some of what we did. So just the next slide. Okay, so yeah, we just quickly wanted to show you, so apart from this report, the other key thing that we did was basically build 2 databases. So one database is of more than 400 grants. So we basically went through many, many months of work tracking every single grant that we could find that went to what we broadly call content controls work in Germany. So anything that talked about disinformation, anything that talked about counter-hate speech, anything that talked about combating conspiracism, anything that had been handed out. So what the result is, you can basically go through and search these grants, these 400 plus grants, and basically see where your money, because oftentimes it's government money. There is some amount of private money that was a bit harder to find, but basically the government money that is going to these different types of initiatives. And there's on the side, you'll see there's a whole bunch of filters that you can maybe just click one, Sophia. What year they were handed out. You can look at the different types of funders if you keep scrolling down. If you hover over the English, you can also change it to German as well. It uses machine translation because there's a lot there to translate and we didn't quite have the budget to do that. But you can the idea is really that we want this to be a kind of resource for people to start digging more deeply into what the space or what it is that's going on here. Obviously, some people have, but we want this to be a resource for journalists and advocates and different movements who are pushing for free speech. And then if you go, Sophia, to the other one with the organizations, then the same thing. So here we basically tracked almost 330 organizations. Each one has 300 to 500 words written about it. Maybe if you open Faktenfuchs or use the news, that you can basically read through profiles on every single of these 330 organizations that are doing some level of content control. So we don't say every time that it's a censorship organization, because some of them, maybe they're doing some nice sounding anti-hate speech initiative that you might actually agree with and think is okay. Other times they're working very closely with the government or the police to flag content and get it taken down. So you can go through. One of the things we did is flag each, or we gave them a rating of how bad we thought they were, from one red flag to 5 red flags. So you can basically search which ones we thought were 1 red flag, maybe not so bad, and then ones that we gave 3 or 5 red flags that we think are the worst. So we're trying to point you to, again, we really want feedback, because this is our attempt to try and understand, again, using the mapping skills that we did looking at this in the United States, to understand the system, but we don't know it entirely. So it's really a kind of seed that we hope will build on top of a lot of the work that we know has already happened. There's obviously a lot of journalism and have been books and other things written, but every time I kind of came to Germany, people were like, there's not enough going on in this space. We need more going on in this stuff. I thought, well, is there any contribution I can make? I thought, I can use what I've learned from doing the US and other places and see how it might be useful here. So please kind of go through and have a look. Again, the little QR code on the back will take you to the site, and you can have a look, and please tell us what you think. If you like it, if you don't like it, maybe you want to give us 1 flag, maybe you want to give us 5 red flags. You can also rate us. Do you want to go back to the presentation, Sophia? So, and I'll try and be a bit quick because I'm probably overusing my time. So the other thing we did was basically, with all of this data, these almost 330 organizations and around 425 grants, try and build some information graphics to tell the story of what it is that is going on. So this is the funding within Germany that we were able to discover, the 425 grants, starting in 2015. So you'll really see a big uptick in 2021 and another one in 2023. So you can you can map those to internal events or global and events in Germany that might relate to that. 2025 is obviously not over yet, so I would expect it will probably be as high as 2024, because we're still missing data from 2025. So you can see a huge increase. Now, was there something different in social media between 2015 2016, and 2018? I would say no. The social media space was largely the same. What changed was a number of political events. Next, Sophia. This is the breakdown of various government funding. Just so again, you can see the kind of growth. Again, 2025 not yet complete. But you can see how the mountain is increasing. Next. And then this is mapping of all the 330 organizations we found out when they started doing this type of work. Because some were older organizations that at some point decided, oh, we really need to get into the anti-disinformation space. Others were new organizations that started up specifically to combat disinformation. So you can see huge growth in 2017. Another huge growth, I think that's in 2020. So you can think again, is that COVID? Is that Trump and Brexit? Is that something more kind of specific to the German context that is kind of leading to this huge increase in focus on these issues? Next. This is the top 20 funders. Again, most of these are government funding because the private funding was harder to find. But these are your kind of key ministries. Demokratie Leben really comes up a lot. Even though it's not the biggest funder. So that seems very interesting. But again, all of this is in the report and on the site where you'll find this, so you can kind of look at these more with a little bit more time. Next. And these are the top 20 recipients, so who's actually getting most of the money. So this Matra initiative, which is an academic initiative that works quite closely with the police to monitor content. So there's academics and the police working together, which is interesting academic activity. Jungen Schutz, Ruben, Deutsche Welle. Again, so you have an idea of who's actually, getting the most money to be doing this kind of work and who actually has the most power in this space. Next. This is particularly who Demokratie Leben is giving the money out to. Hate Aid, which seems to have got a bit of a reputation, as I understand, for canceling people or getting their content taken down, I guess using taxpayers' money, the public's money. So one of the things we really noticed that was different about the US is just how closely government and civil society work together here, more closely in the US. The US First Amendment, I think, means that they had to kind of hide it a little bit more. Here, it doesn't seem like they worry so much about whether or not they're working. Civil society, which should be holding government accountable, is working so closely with government. Next, I've got a few more, and then I promise to hand the mic over, and you'll hear the end of Florian's joke. Get it ready, Florian. And then this is the breakdown of the types of organizations, right? So you'll see the huge slice of NGOs that are working on this, governments, foundations, academic initiatives, etc. If you go into the website, these are interactive. You can click on them and get more information. Next. What are they working on, or what are the justifications that they're seeking to kind of highlight? So disinformation is the biggest one. Threats to democracy. This is one you don't see so much in the US. That seems to, again, be a kind of language particular to Germany. Same with conspiracy theories. This one you don't see so much in the US context. They just go into disinformation. But we thought particularly to put conspiracy theories in here because it seemed to be used quite so much. Hate speech, et cetera, et cetera. These are the justifications, so how they frame the thinking. Next. And then what are the activities they're actually doing? There's actually a huge amount that's just education and literacy. So school activities to kind of train people in who is right in particular conflicts, who you should be supporting if two states or people go to war. A huge number of research initiatives. Actually, fact-checking and content flagging is a little bit less, but obviously very important in terms of that's where the actual censorship tends to happen. And then this is the map. So this, again, is our subjective, based on our methodology, attempt to understand who we think are the most important of all these 330 organizations that we found, who seems to be the most important based on the amount of money they have, based on how much they're engaging directly in censorship, based on how closely they work with government, how much they have a kind of odd ideology of there's a group of people who know what's true and they can decide for the peasants what can be allowed to be said and what cannot be allowed to be said. This seems to be the kind of dominant ideology within these kind of elite spaces, which I think is fundamentally wrong in terms of how we do truth-seeking and meaning-making in a democracy. It's actually fundamentally anti-democratic, I would argue. So if there's a threat to democracy, then I would actually say it's the anti-disinformation organizations and the fact-checkers and the content flaggers who are threatening democracy, not the people. So I'll leave it there. Thank you.